Do you see a light when you are falling asleep? Yes, I do. Doesn't everyone? The boy's voice was filled with wonder. Soon after they first met, Sri Ramakrishna asked Narendra this question. His reply provided the master with a deep insight into the past, the nature, and the destiny of this remarkable youngster who would later become Swami Vivekanand. In Vivekanand's adult years, he himself described this supernormal faculty. From the earliest time that I can remember, I used to see a marvelous point of light between my eyebrows as soon as I shut my eyes to go to sleep. And I used to watch its various changes with great attention. That marvelous point of light would change colors and get bigger until it took the form of a ball. Finally, it would burst and cover my body from head to foot with white liquid light. As soon as that happened, I would lose outer consciousness and fall asleep. I used to believe that was the way everybody went to sleep. Then, when I grew older and began to practice meditation, that point of light would appear to me as soon as I closed my eyes. And I would concentrate upon that. Sri Ramakrishna had a vision before Narendra was born. One day, I found that my mind was soaring high in samadhi, along a luminous path. As it ascended higher and higher, I found on both sides of the way ideal forms of gods and goddesses. The mind then reached the outer limit of that region, where a luminous barrier separated the sphere of relative existence from that of the absolute. Crossing that barrier, the mind entered the transcendental realm, where no corporeal being was visible. But the next moment, I saw seven venerable sages seated there in samadhi. It occurred to me that these sages must have surpassed not only men, but even the gods in knowledge and holiness, in renunciation and love. Lost in admiration, I was reflecting on their greatness, when I saw a portion of their undifferentiated luminous region condense into the form of a divine child. The child came to one of the sages, tenderly clasped his neck with his lovely arms, and, addressing him in a sweet voice, tried to drag his mind down from the state of samadhi. That magic touch rose the sages from his superconscious state, and he fixed his half open eyes upon the wonderful child. In great joy, the strange child spoke to him. I am going down. You too must go with me. The sage remained mute, but his tender look expressed his assent. No sooner had I seen Narendra than I recognized him to be that sage. Later, Sri Ramakrishna disclosed the fact that the divine child was none other than himself. Swami Vivekanand was born in Calcutta at 6:49 a.m. on Monday, 12th January 1863, and was given the name Narendranath Datta. Bhuvaneshwari Devi, Narendra's mother, had practiced austerities and prayed to Vireshwar Shiva of Varanasi to give her a son. She was delighted that Lord had answered her prayer. Bhuvaneshwari Devi was deeply religious and raised her children according to the ancient spiritual traditions of India. She taught Narendra, remain pure all your life, guard your own honor, and never transgress the honor of others. Be very tranquil, but when necessary, harden your heart. His father, Vishwanath Datta, was an attorney of the Calcutta High Court. He was extremely generous and had a progressive outlook in social and religious matters, owing perhaps to the influence of the Western education he had received. Brought up and educated in 19th century Calcutta, Narendra was introduced at an early age to the principles of Western thinking, which taught that one should not accept anything without evidence. Although he was a brilliant student and well versed in history, philosophy, literature, and contemporary Western thought, he firmly held his conviction: do not believe a thing because another has said it is so. Find out the truth for yourself. That is realization. Sri Ramakrishna said about him, Narendra is a great soul, perfect in meditation. He cuts the veils of Maya to piece with sword of knowledge. Inscrutable Maya can never bring him under control. Once a cobra appeared when Narendra was meditating with his friends. The other boys were frightened. They shouted a warning to him and ran away. But Narendra remained motionless. The cobra, after lingering for a while, crawled away. Later, he told his parents, I knew nothing of the snake or anything else. I was feeling inexpressible joy. At the age of 15, he experienced spiritual ecstasy. He was journeying with his family to Raipur in central India, and part of the trip had to be made in a bullock cart. On that particular day, the air was crisp and clear. The trees and creepers were covered with blossoms, and birds of beautiful plumage sang in the forest. The cart was moving through a narrow pass where the lofty peaks rising on both sides almost touched each other. Narendra caught sight of a large beehive in the cleft of a giant cliff. The hive must have been there a very long time. Suddenly, his mind was filled with awe and reverence for the divine providence, and he lost outer consciousness. Perhaps this was the first time that his powerful imagination helped him to ascend to the realm of the superconscious. Once during his days as a student, Narendra had a vision. While at school one night, I was meditating behind closed doors and had a fairly deep concentration of mind. How long I meditated in that way, I cannot say. After the meditation was over, I remained seated. Then from the southern wall of that room, a luminous figure stepped out and stood in front of me. It was the figure of Sannyasin, monk, absolutely calm, with shaven head and a staff and a kamandalu, water pot, in either hand. He gazed at me for some time and seemed as if he would address me. I, too, gazed at him in speechless wonder. Suddenly, a kind of fright seized me. I opened the door and hurried out of the room. Then it struck me that it was foolish of me to run away like that. Perhaps he might say something to me. But I have never seen that figure since. I think it was the Lord Buddha whom I saw. Principal William Hastie of General Assembly's Institution, now Scottish Church College, remarked, Narendranath is really a genius. I have travelled far and wide, but I have never yet come across a lad of his talents and possibilities. Even in German universities, amongst philosophical students, Dr. Brajendranath Seal, Naren's fellow student, who later became a leading Indian philosopher, wrote, undeniably a gifted youth, sociable, free and unconventional in manners, a sweet singer, the soul of social circles, a brilliant conversationalist, somewhat bitter and caustic, piercing with his shafts of a keen wit the shows and mummeries of the world, sitting in the corner's chair, hiding the tenderest of hearts under that grab of cynicism. Altogether an inspired bohemia, but possessing what bohemians lack, an iron will, somewhat peremptory and absolute, speaking with accent of authority and withal, possessing a strange power of the eye, which could hold his listeners in thrall. Narendra was a well-rounded person. He was a musician, a debater, gymnast, philanthropist, an ideal, yogi, mystic, ascetic, worker, and philosopher. He was energy personified. Some years later, he told one of his English disciples, "In my childhood, I used to observe an inexhaustible force arising in me, overflowing in my body, as it were. I used to become restless and could not keep quiet. This was why I used to fidget all the time. My insides would vibrate, as it were, and make me restless to do something." Romain Rolland, the famed French writer and Swami Vivekanand's biographer, wrote, "He was tall, 5 feet 8.5 inches, 170 pounds, square shouldered, broad chested, stout, rather heavily built. His arms were muscular and trained to all kinds of sports. He had an olive complexion, a full face, vast forehead, strong jaw, a pair of magnificent eyes, large, dark, and rather prominent, with heavy lids, whose shape recalled the classic comparison to lotus petal. Nothing escaped the magic of his glance, capable equally of embracing in its irresistible charm, or of sparkling with wit, irony, or kindness, of losing itself in ecstasy, of plunging imperiously to the very depths of the consciousness and of the withering with its fury. But his preeminent characteristic was kingliness. He was a born king, and nobody ever came near him either in India or America without paying homage to his majesty. In his intense desire to realize the truth, young Narendra practiced meditation. He studied different religious and philosophical systems of the East and the West. He met different religious leaders, but nothing was of any avail. He even joined the Brahmo Samaj, a socio-religious organization, and asked its leader, Devendranath Tagore, "Sir, have you seen God?" Devendranath was embarrassed and replied, "My boy, you have the eyes of a yogi. You should practice meditation." Narendra's spiritual struggle continued. His first introduction to Ramakrishna occurred one day in a literature class, when he heard Principal Hasty lecturing on Wordsworth's The Excursion and the poet's nature mysticism. Hasty told his students that with purity and concentration, such transcendental experience was possible, but in modern times had become extremely rare. "I have known only one person," he added, "who has realized that blessed state, and he is Ramakrishna of Dakshineshwar. You will understand it better if you visit this saint."